Welcome, this is John Hyman from Commercial Real Estate Online. This is the Industrial Property Checklist. This is a checklist process for handling industrial property from a leasing or a sales perspective. And indeed, if you need to check out the website to get more detail on this, this is the article, and in that article you can get plenty of tips, tools and ideas where the matrix is also built from. So let's go further. So the industrial property checklist, what are the things that you need to consider from a sales and a leasing perspective? What do you need to understand when it comes to listing that property? I've put down here many different topics to think about, and indeed items 1 right through to item 18, many different topics to work through. So in this particular video today, I'll go through the first segment of topics and take you into the subsections so that you understand the industrial property listing process. And of course there'll be other videos in this series as well. So let's go further and look at number 1, which is the development costs. When you have an industrial property to take to the market, or indeed you're considering industrial property from a sales or leasing perspective, understand the development costs that apply in your location, particularly from a construction perspective, also a financing perspective. Also look at the land, the amount of land that's available for industrial development locally. And on top of that, there will be various zonings. So the zonings will of course allow industrial businesses to operate in particular ways. And you need to know the differences between the zonings, because that will all have an impact on who you should be targeting when it comes to that industrial property or that opportunity in industrial over time. Of course, there may be a good supply of land in your town or city for industrial. Then again, there may not be. It depends on whether your town or city has had significant development in industrial over time. Understand what's there, understand where the land is going to come from, and put that in balance when you consider development costs. You can usually get a booklet of information that relates to construction costs, be it industrial, office or retail, but in this particular case you're focusing on industrial property. Understand the development costs that apply on average to industrial property in your location. Get the development costs, look at so much per square metre or so much per square foot, and then you'll know whether a property has viability when it comes to development. And as part of that, of course, you will have land costs, that is so much per square metre or so much per square foot in purchasing the land, the raw land, for the development aspect. I go back to the other point of zonings. Understand the zonings that apply in the industrial precinct or area, or how things can be rezoned to achieve the best price or the best lease outcome in industrial over time. Of course, financing will change throughout the year, and when that does, of course, money may be more or less available for the industrial property, and a lot depends on the capability of the property owner to borrow money in today's terms. So that is the first aspect to consider in the industrial property checklist, that is the development costs. So let's go further. Let's go to number 2, the land costs. So what do you need to think about here when looking at land? Well, first off, I'd have a very good look at the comparable sites in the area to understand just what's out there from a land perspective, to see what vacant land may be available for an industrial application. How much land is there in your town or city? How much is available in new sites, and of course how many current sites are available as well. By the name greenfield site, I'm referring to something that's totally new that can be reverted to industrial over time. That will depend on the local council, the municipal council, and their zoning applications or zoning intentions when it comes to industrial locally. Now you can look at a site change or upgrade as well, because some industrial properties may be suitable for an upgrade, maybe a redevelopment or a change. Have a look at the local industrial properties to see if some are ready for a rebuild, a renovation, an upgrade or a change. As part of that as well, also look at your zonings again. Get to know the zonings in your industrial areas. So let's go a bit further and consider warehouse design. When you're an industrial leasing specialist or sales specialist, you need to look at the warehouse and its design relevant to the way in which the property should be operated. So there are different things to look at here. Firstly, the circulation, that is the circulation of vehicles around the property, into the property and around it. As part of that, you'll need to look at delivery and access doors into the warehouse, because there'll need to be goods taken in and taken away from the property, and the access doors will be part of that. Of course, there'll be certain size trucks going to the industrial site. You need to understand how they will access the site and how they will get into the warehouse for deliveries. There will be various loading docks for use within the industrial application, and some loading docks today are very specialised, and they can allow goods to be loaded and unloaded very quickly. Look at that, understand what loading docks are available and how they work. Also in the warehouse design, look at the office location, that is the office space. Look at the ratio of office to warehouse space. Typically you wouldn't want more than, say, 10 to 15% of office space to the warehouse size overall. Too much office space makes the property generally unlettable or unoccupiable, because most industrial applications don't need a lot of office space. Understand that, review that. Now in some warehouse applications there'll need to be a showroom somewhere to showroom the goods that are manufactured on site. So look at that, understand how it works and how customers can get into the showroom. In the warehouse itself there will be spans, the distance between the spans, the support spans of the roof in the industrial application. In a modern industrial building the spans are quite spread apart, and that allows the warehouse to work effectively from a storage and access perspective. And in mentioning storage, understand how the storage can work in the property, where it is, how it works, the load capabilities of the floor, and how the trolley trucks or the high lift trucks would work as far as getting access to storage, putting goods into the warehouse and removing them. So going further here, the support structures within the warehouse, that could be the spans, the roof supports. Just look at them, see how they work, understand how storage could be placed between the roof supports. That is all part of looking at the warehouse design. You could also look at the tolerance, the weight tolerance of the floors within the warehouse as well. So understand the warehouse, understand what the expectations are from a lease or a business occupant perspective. Understand how a good warehouse can actually help an industrial tenant or business to perform exceptionally well in producing goods and distributing them. So let's go a bit further here, and let's look at rents, lease types, lease terms and conditions. I put some key lease terms and conditions here for you to look at and understand from the industrial application. So going through them, the bond or the bank guarantees, they will be important, of course, to understand what guarantees can be put on the table by the tenant when it comes to leasing the premises. There may be incentives in the industrial lease, which could be rent-free, maybe a fit-out contribution, maybe a discounted rent over time. Understand what the landlord can afford from an incentive perspective. Of course, if there are a lot of lease vacancies in the industrial property today, then the incentives will need to be there to attract tenants to the property. It's a matter of what the landlord can afford and of course how that can be structured into the lease. The lease term is typically a number of years, and in some industrial applications you'll want a good long lease term. 3 years is a minimum, 5 years is good, 8 to 10 years is excellent. So understand the lease term that the property should attract to stabilise the investment over time. Then we need occupancy controls. Now occupancy controls relate to the type of tenant, the industrial tenant in the building. What controls need to be put in place to make sure that the tenant is doing the right thing within the building? Occupancy controls keep the tenant under control, so they are using the building effectively and correctly over time. They don't break the rules, and of course environmental matters may come into that from an industrial perspective as well. You need to control the tenants so they look after the asset and the business within doesn't break the environmental rules for the location. The next aspect here to consider is the option. Should there be a lease option within the property? It's a question worth considering. In saying that, let's go a bit further. Permitted use is the way in which the building will be used. That should be nominated in the lease itself. Then there is the renovation and upkeep provisions within the industrial property. How will the property be renovated? How will the upkeep continue through the duration of the lease? Who will spend money on the asset? Will it be the landlord, the tenant, or both? How will that occur? How will those renovations be done? Of course, rents in an industrial application are typically net rents, but sometimes you might find a gross rent. So the rents will be a decision with the landlord before the lease negotiation or even the marketing of the lease will occur. So understand the rents, compare them to the local property area, the local property market from an industrial perspective, and make choices. Make sure your rents are competitive. It doesn't really matter where you start with your rents, but it does matter where you finish over time. That will be the escalation of rents within the lease, and that could be a fixed percentage rent review process over time. And also you should consider special occupancy terms to keep the tenant under control or on track as far as best practice when it comes to occupancy. Look at what special terms and conditions should be inserted into the lease to make sure the tenant does the right thing. And as the last aspect here to consider is a standard lease. I always recommend to landlords that they get a standard lease created that suits their investment profile within an industrial lease application. The standard lease should be drawn up by the solicitor, the attorney for the tenant, the landlord, and on that basis the standard lease will be ready when the tenant is found. So, they are the first items in the industrial property checklist. There will be another video shortly taking matters further. So I've covered today development costs, land costs, warehouse design, and also the terms and conditions of the lease, and also the rents, etc. As I said before, you can visit the article at the website, which is Industrial Property Agents. Industrial Property Knowledge is the key in listing. So the website is commercial-realestate-training.com. Search for this article at the website. And I've also put in a booklet in that article for you to download. It's Industrial Property Knowledge is the key in listing. So this is John Hyman. Thanks for listening to this particular video today. I'll catch you in the next video on this particular series, where we will continue from item number 5 and go into some other items in the industrial property checklist. This is John Hyman signing off for now.